I suppose we should be grateful that this limp and cheap-looking epic is bad in a few different ways than we've come to expect. That proves to be every bit as unexciting as it sounds, but at least it's painful to look at. War of the Rohirrim, it's not going well, is it? The rather scary thing about this number is it doesn't even have enough top critics to give them their own score. And those top critics did not like it. The animated Lord of the Rings is a rushed money grab, fast-tracked into production to prevent Studio New Line Cinema from losing the rights to Tolkien's work. Relies on every possible franchise callback jammed into this movie. Even The Guardian didn't like it. And they liked Rings of Power more than House of the Dragon. Well, I mean, until the series was over, anyway. Rohirrim is a redundant, flavourless animation, plundering Tolkien's source material for a plodding adventure, turning a footnote into a film.
Did you keep that in mind at all through the process, or did you just look at the source material and try and be as faithful to it as possible?
Even Empire found it middling. A story of Hera, a narrative about bloodlines and female strength. As an oxymoron if ever there was one.
How come you decided to go with a female lead this time?
It actually was genuinely an organic choice that was led by the storytelling.
There's part of the trailer that really stands out to me.
You think I am afraid of you?
You should be.
Why should he? You should be afraid of somebody who's inferior to you in every single metric required for combat. In that same scene, they have to get her enemy to affirm her intelligence.
The girl is clever. She is up to something.
That's how you know somebody's really smart, when other people have to constantly tell you they are. In fact, Hera is so smart, she is responsible for getting her father killed. Go! Helm Hammerhand, the king of the country, the actual person that matters in the story. An absolute badass that waded out against armies alone with his bare fists and won.
Who's out there? Show yourself!
Dies simply because his daughter is too stupid, too thick to not walk outside in front of orcs.
Orcs.
The West Side.
And so he has to die saving the petulant, ignorant, stupid child from her own ridiculous decisions.
Feed her to the beast.
And then, as he's about to die, turns around and goes,
Rohan still needs you.
No, Hera. They need you.
These people are so used to in Hollywood lifting up the inept and the inferior that they write them into their own script. Look, when people said write what you know, they didn't mean this.
You must lead them now.
We have now reached a timeline where even IGN is pointing it out. The War of the Rohirrim fails to justify why this particular tale needs to be told.
You don't want to disappoint anybody, but also I've learned that you have to just make a great movie. And actually, the demands of film are going to have to come first. And that sometimes means you're going to have to change some of the story. But we never do it lightly.
The opening narrative is hesitant. It introduces us to the strong-willed protagonist as she admonishes, "Do not look for tales of her in old songs." It's certainly interesting, at times even exciting, because this is an adventure for the movie. Tolkien's legendarium is not overflowing with strong female characters. That was because he didn't live his life in California and actually had experienced some of the world. It's difficult after you've gone to war and seen men fighting to think that women go to war and fight. What you seem to be running into here is reality.
We never do it without reason or cause. And also, we always, when we have to add story to the story.
You know nothing of war.
I may sound madder than I am. I didn't hate War of the Rohirrim. I think other open-minded fans might even like it. Are you open-minded and willing to see the destruction of the law? Then you might even like it, possibly a bit. Maybe. Doesn't the confidence just fill you with enthusiasm? I don't think I'll ever feel the need to watch this one again, says IGN, some of the people with the lowest standards in the industry. Deadline says that putting the story in the hands of Hera seems right in step with strong female characters who do have a name in Tolkien's text, and perfectly in line for an animated world quite frankly dominated by female character leads these days. They're almost there. Almost. You can see the cogs turning, the spark of the flame catching fire on the twigs as they almost had a thought. Hang on. TV and the entertainment industry seems absolutely, quite frankly, dominated by female character leads these days. And yet we're not making any money. Should we do some more? Let's do a World War II movie with Sharon Stone invading the beaches of Normandy. That'll work.
We try to do it as authentically as possible, And I think that's what we owe the fans, for sure.
Even the Hollywood Reporter says this is a predictably plotted but sumptuously animated prequel, and the art style definitely seems to have divided the critics. For as many reviews as I've read that says, no, the animation is absolutely amazing, there's another group of people that despise it and say it's jumpy and you can't follow the action sequences when they kick off. So as far as the animation style is concerned, 63% seems bang on the money. For the rest, it seems like, well, the story, that's crap. But it does have a female lead, so I'm gonna give it a fresh. And if after all this time you're like, no, nobody's that shallow. Oh, my sweet summer child. Step aside, Galadriel. War of the Rohirrim will be the femme story that Lord of the Rings actually needed. Now, admittedly, this was from June the 14th, 2024, but they were bang on the money. As one review said, the Lord of the Rings franchise gets a much-needed jolt of femme energy with War of the Rohirrim, where previous films were dominated by their male leads and successful and beloved for decades. Shall we continue what's made a success? No, just be evil instead, shall we? This animation tells the story of a brave princess who must rise up to save her imperiled kingdom. It's in peril because of her.
I'm not about to let a man take credit for a woman's work.
Now, admittedly, in the source material, where she's not even named because she was entirely irrelevant and didn't actually contribute anything to history, it doesn't say that it's her fault. But according to the Hollywood Reporter, things in the kingdom take a bad turn when Wolf proposes marriage to Hera, who is not at all interested. A Nerdrotic has quoted her as saying, I am interested in a marriage to no man, which seems like Hera isn't interested in a wedding day, unless she can have a fish course. In the ensuing fracas, great word, the hot-tempered Helm says Freka, who didn't really mean to, but events got out of hand, which, let's face it, from the trailer, I mean, you wouldn't have known.
He's dead.
Looks pretty intentional to me. But the plot is perfunctory, and the melodramatic dialogue isn't much better. And they think that the main thing that the fans will enjoy about the movie are call-outs and references to earlier movies, who seem to forget that if you're going to change the foundational morality of a movie, you need an entirely different audience, which means putting in references to the original thing won't mean anything because they'll be watching a polar opposite movie. The only people that like the new stuff won't be people that like the old stuff, unless, of course, they've radicalized their own morality, as Hollywood has done in the meantime. The great thing about that being, the further time goes on and the more radical you get in the meantime, the fewer people travel with you.
You have these powerful men trying to decide her fate. That immediately became interesting to us to imagine, well, what does she think about that? What does she feel about that?
This means that you're essentially putting call-outs and references to an entirely different movie, and so they don't feel the same to anything because they're not grounded in the same values. It's why you can't have the incredibly masculine Lord of the Rings and the incredibly effeminate War of the Rohirrim and go, people are like both. We'll just put references in. That's all a movie is. Also, including sections of the original music is a good thing to do, but it is essentially an emotional shorthand. Music makes you feel something. And so putting music under something is a way to make the audience feel something that they wouldn't otherwise have done, or aid them along in it. The problem is, if that music is attached to a work they already like, it will remind them of it, and that will make them compare it to what they're already watching, which is fine if they're the same thing, but if they are polar opposites, all you do is exemplify and remind them of what they used to have and what you're now creating. I actually think the music could backfire in this massively. Seems overly long at 134 minutes. That's how you know you're onto a real winner of a movie, when you're going, oh god, when does this end? But the film's creatives are veterans of Jackson's groundbreaking trilogy.
And I always say we never try to change things lightly.
You may wear a crown upon your head, but that does not make you a king.
And always do it in a considered way and for the, a storytelling reason generally.
Let us end this, Wolf, as it began, with you and I.
And also, we never try to add anything that doesn't feel authentic.
You know nothing of war.
We try to do it as authentically as possible.
You think I am afraid of you?
You should be.
Which provides evidence this complementary work has been carefully and lovingly designed. This assumes that they are the same people they were before, had the same values that they did before, and didn't just take their already extreme views then and just make them even more extreme. Perhaps if the warning signs were there originally, those warning signs 20 years on will have evolved into full-blown red flag nuclear weaponry. War of the Rohirrim is the best attempt we've seen expanding the Lord of the Rings universe in recent years. Compared to what? You mean Rings of Power? Has there been anything else?
The one thing that doing this, the War of the Rohirrim, kind of proved was that a standalone story works. It doesn't have to involve Rings of Power and
No one's counting Gollum the video game, alright? I think we can just put that one over there. But it still cannot stand on its own, despite the animation. Well, you know, they can draw. They can't tell a story, but they can draw. There are flashes of brilliance throughout the work. That really is a backhanded compliment, isn't it? It was great for an instant. Look, out of 134 minutes, there might have been at least 60 seconds of genius. If it's not enough for your wife, it's not enough for the movie. Most of them stemming from the animation. There was nothing brilliant about the plot, according to this. Some of my favorite reviews are where they're trying to be positive, but by trying to be positive, there's kind of lead this hole that they don't talk about. You're like, oh, so if this was you trying to be positive, it makes it sound like all the stuff you're not talking about was absolutely trash. The animation was kind of alright, a bit sometimes. What about everything else? Its better moments come from the film's first act. Would that be the bit with Helm Hammerhand in it? You know, where we took this incredible example of masculinity and then put that aside because we wanted to write a story about somebody who is so inferior and useless, someone so incompetent, somebody so pathetically inconsequential, they couldn't even be bothered to give her a name. One guy wanted to bang her for a bit and everyone else did things. The entire thing that she contributes to the source material is that she had a hole that somebody else wanted, which coincidentally from the reviews seems to be what she brings to this movie. Hera is a born hero, smart and courageous. It's only the strictures of her world that hold her back. She's strong, powerful, uplifted by diversity quotas. She's never known a glass ceiling that a man wouldn't build a staircase for her to climb through. But my favourite thing about this Screen Rant article is once again how close they are to having a realization, how close they are to having a thought. As fun as it can be to subvert expectations, embracing more traditional arcs for the pro and antagonist feels right for this film. We should embrace traditional arcs for this IP created by a traditional author, as we have a very modern day unrealistic hero. You were so close. Keep banging up against that wall of reality and then thinking, no, it's the people that are wrong. War of the Rohirrim's strongest asset, you'd hope, is the animation. No, a story's strongest asset should be its plot and its characters. What you've done is like saying a game's strongest asset is its graphics, rather than its gameplay. In fact, we are so desperate for positives about this movie that we're going, well, you know, I mean, it's got mixed reviews, but I mean, it's higher rated than the Hobbit movies? Oh, I mean, people may not like this movie, but at least they hate other things more. Of course, as ever, the judgment about the Hobbit movies was done against the backdrop of the quality of Hollywood at the time. Now we've had many years of Hollywood getting worse, people might look more fondly on those movies. Oh, and that's interesting. When I just went to quickly fact check it, it's actually at 64% critic compared to 63. So it turns out even your cope isn't accurate anymore. And it just gets me that even the people which are desperate to try and make this story like successful, they really want to like it. War of the Rohirrim is a tiresome, deep-cut anime prequel for die-hard Hobbit fans. It entirely breaks the law, even in the 8 minutes of footage they released to market the movie.
You can choose. You can choose how this ends.
Considering the law for this tale barely exists, it's actually incredibly impressive that you managed to break it in 8 minutes that you released. Also breaking it in the worst way possible, with the way Helm Hammerhand died.
No, Hera. They need you. You must lead them now.
Father does not see the line of his house residing in her, which kind of means the strength of his house residing in her. It resides in the sons. And
in the book, it's really cool. He's going out and just annihilating people with his fists, and then one morning he just doesn't return, and he's left out in the cold, frozen as a statue, and nobody knows what's happened to him. That is a legendary, mythical death, especially as when he lived, he was instilling fear, already a horrific myth to his enemies. And yet in the movie, you change that to his idiotic daughter getting killed. Well done. Remember what Phillippa Boyens said?
We try to do it as authentically as possible, you know.
we never try to add anything that doesn't feel authentic.
You just look at the source material and try and be as faithful to it as possible.
So as tiresome a deep cut this is, they do say that there's one positive about War of the Rohirrim. It introduces another female hero. Look, it's crap in every single way possible, but at least she doesn't have dangly bits. And you wonder why nobody takes you seriously. The animated spin-off may not be strictly canonical. When you're writing a story about something that barely has any canon, it should be canonical. It may please the faithful, but it's not quite epic enough to give less devoted viewers the same thrill they once felt. How do you think that breaking the canon will please the faithful? I think this is one of those moments where if you're not a fan of it, you're like, well, you know, maybe they made it for hardcore people. And if you really like the lore, you're like, oh, they probably made it for those people over there that know nothing about it. So every group thinks that the other group likes it when nobody does. The film opens with a young woman with hair the colour of Advil tablets. Are they on your mind or something? That's a very weird thing to write in a review. This is no ordinary lass. Should be, though. shouldn't it? She doesn't have superpowers.
Can it be true, mild-mannered Jeff Murdoch? Are you Spank Man?
Much of the plot concerns who will inherit Rohan once the imposing patriarch dies. No, if you wanted a good story, what you needed was an imposing patriarch, a hero. When Helm won't seize his kingdom, Wolf plans to take it by force, leading a massive army. Hera cleverly anticipates the attack. Well, the first half of the film proves engaging enough. I ask again, is that the part with Helm Hammerhand in it? The remainder grows tiresome. Hera, whom Boyens is motivated to position as being every bit as brave and resourceful as any of the heroic men they celebrated in the live-action films.
You were too much of a coward to face my father, so face me now.
We never try to add anything that doesn't feel authentic.
And why not? Because they're not. For every single biological and psychological reason which men are more disposable, sacrificial, risk-takers, because they are far more variable, and most of all because it's what they evolved to be. There's a reason why every single heroic story is based in masculine values. The hero's journey is a male coming-of-age story. But why not? Let's just lie to ourselves and pretend we don't know anything about humanity. Thousands of years on Earth, and they have literally regressed. These are devolved people. Fantasy feels like the ideal form in which to balance the male-dominated feats that dominate human history on Earth, where we'll find no equivalent. Oh my god, they even understood the problem. At no point in their tiny little minds did they think, hang on, maybe all of human history might have happened for a reason. I mean, if we can't do it in real life, why don't we just lie? Let's just do it in fantasy and pretend that we can all get behind this new myth. I mean, if we never take part in any war, why don't we just have all of our stories pretending that we do? Maybe it's because stories mean something. Maybe it's because they have to reflect the underlying values of humanity. Maybe they're actually meant to pass down lessons and teach humanity how to behave. Maybe this is why the audience that you're so desperately seeking by doing this doesn't exist. Because everybody knows that what you're teaching is a farce. And so do you, because you know it's never happened throughout all of human history, which you'd think would be a bit of a sign. I am gobsmacked. I really am. Tolkien had already imagined Éowyn, which everybody seems to forget that she disguised herself as a man, took on a male role, and then at the end decided that she wanted to settle down and have children. It's almost like the lesson of Éowyn isn't the big action that she did. She wasn't meant to teach people to go out and start doing what men do. Hera was conceived in her image. I highly doubt that your view of what needs to be done now and Tolkien's from then is the same. But another dynamic female role model won't revive it alone. Fans will find a few connecting references that most people should have no trouble skipping over, but it seems like the Lore of the Ring is no longer what it once was. And there it is. When IPs like this fail, people think it's the IP's fault. It isn't. You did a big long speech, a massive review talking about how much you loved Hera and how, despite the fact that her story never existed throughout all of human history, this is where it belonged. That it should teach humanity about how actually it is possible, even though we have thousands of years of actual reality proving it isn't. And then you go, yeah, it was crap though, wasn't it? I mean, the story that I wanted, the narrative, the values that I wanted to push, actually is crap and doesn't speak to me as a human on a base level. Yeah, it's probably Lord of the Rings' fault. It's probably the IP. It can't be me. It can't be my values. It can't be my story. It can't be what I pushed. It can't be what I asked for in my review. Nah, it must be the IP's fault. This is what I mean when I say the people in the industry have no idea what's wrong with the industry. They are making the exact product that they want, that they're asking for, and it doesn't please themselves. And they will never realize that it's them and their values which are the problem. This is how you end up with people going, oh well, you know, War of the Rohirrim box office prospects. That just proves that anime isn't invulnerable. It's like, this isn't even anime. Anime is a product of Japan. It's part of Japanese culture, which is why the stories are from their culture. What you have here is a Western release. It's a cartoon. You've just made a Western cartoon written by Western writers and then thought, yeah, but I mean, the style, it looks like it's from Japan.
Spank Man?
Yeah, but it was made with your modern Western values, to which the world, including the West, find as repulsive. That's not anime's fault. That's yours. Now, there is a foreign review here that I translated, and so I'm not sure of the accuracy of this translation, but it says, by its end, Hera turned into the living spirit of Rohan. Sorry? I really hope that's a mistranslation. Well, it doesn't disagree with the general tone of Tolkien's work. It seems shallow and awkward in comparison, because the modern morals that you're basing it off are of less pillars, are less complicated than previously. You literally went from a story about justice and sacrificing yourself for the good of your people to That's why IndieWire says the execution leaves a little or a lot to be desired. I suppose we should be grateful that this limp and cheap-looking epic is bad in a few different ways than we've come to expect. At least it aspires to be a fresh experience from all the familiar tedium of watching Hollywood pick a franchise dry. I'm sorry, what do you think this is? This is literally Hollywood picking a franchise dry and going, stick a chick in it. Hera would rather spend her time hanging out with giant animals than involving herself in politics. That's why she didn't deserve to be ruler. Hera exudes a dramatically oppressive strength, and it makes it harder for him to recognize that she is the obvious heir to this throne. No, her entire job as a princess is to marry someone for the good of the kingdom, to forge bonds between kingdoms. That is her sole duty as princess. It's what she was born for. This has been the same throughout all of history. You'd think that Wolf, being her childhood friend, would prove relevant to the story at some point, but Phillippa Boyens displays a perverse disinterest in mining that connection for drama or pathos. No, she's far too interested in going, or,
you're pure evil.
And you're just another man taking credit for a woman's work.
Perhaps that's for the best, as Wolf is a truly ridiculous character who may not have rewarded any further investigation. There are no fewer than 4 different scenes where his right-hand man advises him to make a rational decision, only for Rolf to immediately, often in the very next breath, opt for the rash and violent route instead. We even saw that in the trailer.
The girl is clever. She is up to something. Do not take the bait.
I accept your challenge!
No, Wolf, don't do it. She's far too intelligent, smart, brave, and great at fighting for you.
I'm not afraid of you! You should be.
I think the only solution for Hollywood is to impose a minimum testosterone level in the writer's room. It also makes for a painfully dull contrast to Hera's righteous stoicism. Ah, yes. That famously feminine trait. She's the perfect leader, and he's a rabid moron. That's because he's got dangly bits and she's got the power of fallopian tubes. Hitherto undefeated in war, largely because they've never taken part in it. Wolf builds a single siege tower while Hera speechifies about pride and safety behind the walls of her father's stronghold. That proves to be every bit as unexciting as it sounds, but at least it's painful to look at. That's because people like Hera are renowned for their inspirational war speeches. That's why we have so many examples of them throughout history. We shall fight them at the Starbucks because I'm worth it. The combination of Tolkien and Miyazaki only magnifies this movie's glaring inability to find any soul of its own. Needless to say, it makes all too much sense that Hera's legend has been forgotten by the time Aragorn and his friends arrive in her father's kingdom some 2 centuries later. Yes, when the men finally arrive to do what they should have always done. They just want to put Hera's failure behind them. Even Total Film came out and said this is an uninspired expansion to the most iconic screen take on Tolkien. A visually stunning return to Middle-earth is a bumpy ride. Gorgeous in all mediums, but bottled in a rather underwhelming tale. Something seems to be deeply wrong at the core of War of the Rohirrim, and I would say it's its values. Rather than the Lord of the Rings take, where it wanted to put Tolkien's values in it rather than theirs, this is definitely their values. War of the Rohirrim seems to be the great correction that was demanded. In Rings of Power, it's not horrifying to be a woman. They've always been crucial in Lord of the Rings, but now they're main characters. And you just see the kind of attitude that's been taken to Lord of the Rings. With it being a male property, obviously they thought it needed to be destroyed. You can't have masculine values when you're trying to stage a moral takeover. That's why they were like, well, my female friends asked, is this the version of Middle-earth where we're going to be routinely assaulted, degraded, and objectified? Are we going to have hackneyed stereotypes? The women are either beautiful and distant, or simply simple. What the War of the Rohirrim seems to be is predictable. With Lord of the Rings being a masculine property, obviously that was going to be wrong. It had to be counteracted, balanced out. It needed to be corrected. Because if you look upon a man's role with envy and wish it for yourself rather than realizing that you should stay in your own role, you ever think, why can't I do that? Why didn't I do that? Why am I never written into the position that I never did throughout all of history? And so things like War of the Rohirrim are simply fantasies. I wish I could be like them, and so I'm going to write myself in that story. But they miss that the underlying quality of a story to make it believable is to make it authentic, to have everybody in their place doing their role, to have the men and the women act like men and women, and they don't. Because as long as you envy somebody else's role, as long as you wish you were like that, as long as you try and pretend that you can be, it's unbelievable. It's out of place. It draws people out of the movie. What you make is a living satire, an actual farce of what you are. It's just, that's never gonna happen, though. You can't get immersed in the work because it's wrong. Until you're taking the values of one role and putting it in the role of another, and it just doesn't work. This is a fundamental aspect of storytelling that we've known throughout all of history. Things have been done throughout all of history for a reason. But now we have a load of people in Hollywood who think they know better. The world would be better if only I could have done it all. And never stop to ask. Could you, though? Because people love to point out Eowyn taking on a man's role, and always seem to forget how, in the end, she took on her own. And if stories are meant to teach you something, maybe they were meant to teach you that. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.